Welcome, everybody, to our Conference USA Roundtable. I'm Ron Thulin. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had a number of Zoom calls and conference roundtables dealing with a number of different subjects. We're going to advance that today, talk about something that has hit our country hard, and some players, coaches, administrators that have a unique perspective of what is going on and suggestions of what we all can do better. Joining us today is the Senior Associate Commissioner of Conference USA, Merton. Merton, good to have you with us today.
Always good to see you, Ron. Thank you for having me.
Lisa Campos, she is the UTSA Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics. Lisa, good to have you with us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And the Charlotte head football coach, Will Healy. Will, how you doing today?
Y'all ran out of options if you got to me. I'm glad to be with you.
And Rodney Terry, the head men's basketball coach at UTEP. Rodney, good to have you with us again.
Thanks, Ron. We appreciate you having me.
And last but not least, certainly a young man that stands out not only on the football field, but also off the football field. And we're anxious to get his perspective from Old Dominion, Mufu Taiwo. Mufu, good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ron. Appreciate it.
You know, I want to start with you, Merton, because I think this is important. We were chatting just a few moments ago about this. College campuses in general, especially athletics, it doesn't matter. Race, religion, diversity, where you're from. It seems like athletics always is able to bring people together. From your perspective, from being not only a college football player, but also in the National Football League, how are sports unique in that situation?
Because at the end of the day, Ron, there's a goal to be met. Everyone in the room, regardless of socioeconomic background, where they are from in the world, we're all trying to achieve the same goal, and the goal becomes the thing to focus on, not your particular differences on how you were raised or your world viewpoint. I do think it's important in every sport, whether it be football or Olympic sports, baseball, basketball, what have you. The fundamentals are what's important. The fundamentals of the sport, the craft of the sport, and the craft of relationship, because you have to learn to work with everybody in the room to get to that goal. So, and to be able to do that, you just cannot allow negatives such as racism or a ignorant viewpoint to stand in the way of the group achieving that goal. So my time certainly as a NCAA athlete and as a professional athlete, the one thing that helped galvanize the room was there was always a standard. It didn't matter how I personally felt, the standard was this: how we treated one another, how we went about the business of representing our institution, our conference, our professional team. Those helped us deal with all kind of negative things that could potentially pop up. Because again, the goal is what matters.
Well, I want you to pick up on that, because when we were talking a few minutes ago, you said something that really hit me, and I wrote it down: listening. Is that part of our problem? We don't listen?
Yeah, and sometimes we're not interested in listening. You know, I think that the biggest thing that our team has been able to talk about through this is a lot of what people judge another race on is their experience. And as Merton talked about, when you have an experience as an athlete or as a coach, and you have an opportunity to meet people from all different shapes, sizes, colors, religions, races, whatever it may be, then your perception changes. And the problem that we have a lot of times, you know, especially having been, I mean, I'm a 35-year-old white male from Ottawa, Tennessee, that grew up in a private school, that went to a private university, that was a member at a country club. I mean, I grew up in a really white world. And the things that I learned in the history books that I was looking at, you know, there's not some of the African-American history moments that I need to know about, that I need to learn about. I feel like a failure because sometimes it's taken me these type of situations for me to really dig in and really learn things that I already should know, because some of my best friends don't look like me, talk like me, walk like me, aren't from the same background. You know, the guys that I get a chance to work with on my staff are from all different, you know, backgrounds. And the players, obviously, that I get a chance to coach are the same way. So I feel ignorant because sometimes it's taken situations like this for me to really learn and grow, but I need to listen. I need to make sure that that I'm humble enough to say I need to learn and that I don't have all the answers. And fortunately, I got a group of players and coaches around me who are willing to teach me.
Rodney, I want you to talk about this also because you have Zooms with your team. And one of the things you said, you're trying to get to know them and go a little bit deeper than what happens on the basketball court. Talk about what you've been going through.
Well, I think the thing we try to address, and we meet with our guys Tuesday, Thursdays, and we've been doing a lot of basketball up until the time that a lot of the things transpired here recently, and we put basketball aside because there was much more important things going on, and we kind of dove into race relations, and I think again, in basketball and a lot of sports, you have a lot of good blends in terms of. You have guys from all different types of backgrounds. You have guys from different countries. So you have a lot of different dynamics going on within a team. And I think the thing we try to do is we try to, one, identify race and say, hey, you know what, we do see color, and let's take it a step further. A white player is going to see something totally different than a black player. And watching what happened with George Floyd, I have a perception of it. They may have a whole different perception of it in terms of their lens and what they're seeing it through. And maybe based on their experience, maybe where they're from and their background, lends them that type of a perception of that. But I think it's important to understand what it is. So, I ask my guys, how do you feel being black? How do you feel being white? Tell me what being black that you have to deal with every single day that maybe a white person doesn't have to deal with, take for granted. And I tell you what, it led us down the road and down the path of a lot of different answers. And one that was really profound to myself was, in talking with my African-American black players, my guys said, being black, oftentimes the perception that they have from other people is sometimes that of fear or threat. Our guys that I coach, a lot of times they're at least minimum 6'3", 6'9", 6'10", 6'11". So they have a physical presence about themselves. George Floyd had a physical presence about himself as well. And so there's always a perception that hey, maybe this guy is more physical or may put me in more of a threatening situation just by the color of my skin. It doesn't matter what type of person you are. You haven't said anything or communicated, but just the color of my skin gives a threat. And that was very profound to me in terms of, my guys feel that way. And in certain situations, they definitely feel the color piece in that regard and stuff. So, it's an interesting dynamic. And again, I think, how do we continue to get better with that? We have to continue to talk and communicate. We have to listen to each other and really try to get to know one another. And I challenge my team to get to know one another as well, because you also have guys that are international players and they come in and they also have some of the same type of stereotypes at times and things that they have to deal with as well. So I think it's, again, just getting to know each other. It's having uncomfortable conversations a lot of times that people don't want to have. I think that's going to, again, make our society a lot better. Also challenge our guys to be active and be activists, get out and participate, be involved. How many guys are registered to vote? You want to have your voice heard, get registered to vote and make sure we're going to vote. And make sure that your local officials, your state officials, as well as who you want to try to have represent you from a national standpoint as well. And again, that brings about change and being active.
Mufu, we just heard Coach talk about being active. You are one of the active players, along with so many in Conference USA, from the administration of the conference down to athletic directors. You're organizing a march, which will take place this Thursday. Two things for you. Number one, Coach talked about having that physical presence. And sometimes people see and they go, oh, I'm getting away from him. Have you felt that? And number two, what spurred you on to organize a march that is a peaceful march that's going to try to get that message out?
Yeah, so Ron, so that presence thing is definitely something that, especially football players, we definitely are aware of, because you look at me, I'm 6'5", 315 pounds, when I played. So even now that I already lost, 20 pounds, I mean, I still have that big presence. So that is something that we always talk about, even, when I play, always realizing, all eyes are on you. We already look the part, and then we wear our letters, across our chest. So then now, you're already associated, by looks that you are a football player. So that is something that we are told, we are aware of, and we also have to carry ourselves in that manner too, because the headline is always going to say, ODU football player, da. So we have to keep that in mind, and that's always something that we just think about, which is everything that we do, especially in times like this, because, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to, get out. I can be protesting, but because I stick out, they can't see me as that threat. And there has been times where that has been, a problem with, I know a lot of football players are playing today. We do have that, come up and about. And I think that's also what kind of has fueled me to create this march that we're doing, because right now you don't really hear a lot of student athletes, coming up and talking about it, on the platforms that they should. And I think that's because in the past, when situations like this arise, 9 times out of 10, it was always head coach addressed it. And, all right, now we have a game on Saturday. All right, we have practice. We have lift. We have runs. And that's kind of been the situation, with football, which is I've been playing, but then also in a work environment too, where a lot of people really don't speak up because, well, my job can be at risk, and, I don't want this to happen. I can lose, what I'm saying? So that's been that scenario too. But now you really don't see that. You see a lot of people, coming up now, speaking about it and talking about it. And that's kind of something that's been changing, but I think is really good, because we're having these conversations. I've been on so many calls with our head football coach, our AD, our senior staff, our university officials, our president, calling personally, hey, Mufu, what can we do? That's been fueling me to do this march, because with everything going on in the country now, there really hasn't been anything done amongst, universities. And I give credit to Charlotte, because Charlotte, read my mind, weeks in advance before, I created this. So I definitely give them their props with that. But that's the start. So first it was Charlotte. Now it's Old Dominion, okay, who's next to C-USA? Oh, okay, well, now C-USA, we have Norfolk State, down the street. Now they join, so that creates that domino effect. And that's kind of what I kind of wanted to do with this, where this is just the starting ground of more to come. So now we have a march at ODU as a community where our president is involved in an open dialogue, where our AD is involved. You have different leaders involved with this. You have open dialogue with police, which we really need right now with everything going on, where ODPD is a certain way, and they're highly, professional and everything. But then you drive down the street, and then in Virginia Beach, and that whole situation, happened where, the protests turned, violent. So what the main purpose of this is to have open dialogue, make sure that our home's taken care of first. Because then once our home's taken care of and we're all on the same page, same ground moving forward, then we can inspire that change, to move forward, across the country. And I think it definitely needs to start somewhere. And I kind of feel like with the platform that I've had and the student athletes, where they're all kind of searching for a way, how can we voice our voices right now during all of this? This is the way that can come up and come forth. And I think more universities will start to follow this, because everybody wants to do something, but they just don't know what to do. So now coming from, a Black male student athlete, okay, and this worked out, so maybe we can follow along those same lines and start, influencing that change that we see, that we want to see, in our country.
Lisa, I want to pick up on that, because I think that's a great point. Outstanding comment, Mufu, by the way. Sometimes people don't know what to do. We've all seen, Merton and I are probably a little bit older than all of you, these protests that have happened. And as Will said, then all of a sudden it goes away because people don't know what to do. Isn't education on so many different levels, from family to race to everything, isn't education part of the most important cog in this wheel of furthering this conversation and making it meaningful for once?
Absolutely. And I think Mufu had an excellent point that we have to listen to then know what action, right? So I think a lot of universities, a lot of athletic departments right now are still in the processing phase, right? We need to hear the stories. We need to educate ourselves on the experiences that our diverse student athlete and staff population have experienced until we can move into action. So I think that for our student athletes to be leaders and to say, this is how I'd like to move forward, I think that's just so beautiful. And I'm glad that we have administrators who are embracing that. But to your point, Ron, it's listening to the stories, feeling what our student athletes, what our staff have experienced, educating ourselves. I love someone gave the quote, when you're diagnosed with a disease, what's the first thing that you do? You start Googling, you start learning, you take the initiative and understand what that means. And more of us need to do that this is an opportunity to educate yourself, to learn. There's a lot of resources, and not just rely on our students and our staff educating us, but us taking that self-initiative to learn more about these issues.
And Lisa, you're in a unique position because you not only affect the athletes, but you've got to continue this discussion with your entire coaching staff, no matter what sport it is. What have you done to further the conversation and to give them direction? Maybe, again, it comes down to listening to your coaching staff.
Yeah, so first of all, when this was all happening, it was communication with our coaches that now is a critical time for you to be in tune with your students, that you need to have these conversations, you need to listen, and most importantly, maybe is it you need to send a message to all of your students that they belong here at UTSA, they belong in this athletic department, and their voices do matter. And I think it's so critical that every head coach, assistant coach is communicating that to the student athletes, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, that our students belong here. And we are going to be a very inclusive department and university. And then to our staff, that they needed to hear from me and to know, again, that their voices mattered and that I want to hear from them. And so, again, partnering also with our inclusive excellence department is critical in this, because I think a lot of us, a lot of coaches, this is new territory, right? And they're trying to learn how to facilitate these conversations. And we have so many resources on campus to rely on that our VP for Inclusive Excellence is going to host a community gathering just for our student athletes and for our staff, so that they, again, can continue processing this for us to learn what are those next steps, what are the actions that we need to do and take moving forward.
Merton, take it from the conference perspective, because I know you've been at the forefront of this, and the conference is very proactive in all of this. Where do you see the conference in their role in helping these coaches, these administrations, further the conversation?
Well, certainly as best we can. We want to help set the right conditions, the right platform, and we start doing that first and foremost by being representative of what we're trying to achieve. I think for our fans who may not know, we're the only FBS conference that has a female Division I commissioner. There's a wide assortment of race, creed, color amongst our staff. It certainly is representative of what we would want in America. I think, Ron, as you alluded to earlier, having a little bit of age of myself, America, and thus our college campuses, thus our young people, coaches, and all support staff, at some point a decision needs to be made that we're going to live up to the inherent creed of the United States of America if we're going to be that country. And the only way to do that is to get with one another, have those uncomfortable conversations, and press forward. I think what Mufu is doing and what all the panelists are doing is part of that great process of moving forward. So from the conference standpoint, we'll have a number of initiatives moving forward. We certainly want to continue the conversation. Look, racism is a mental health issue as far as I'm concerned. You heard Coach Terry talk about, and Mufu talk about the gyrations that our minority group, regardless African American, Latino, what have you, go through to move about the society. So we want to continue that conversation. We'll be having initiatives rolling out of the conference office in partnership, certainly with our institutions. so we can continue to address issues that lead to systemic change. And I think that's what we're all after.
Coach Terry, you have a unique perspective because UTEP, obviously, the 65-66 season when the Bear Don Haskins led the team to the national championship. And because the African-American players that were on that, it caused a little bit of a controversy. How has that affected you, knowing you're at a university that was, you'd have to say, it was groundbreaking?
Well, for one, I think it's empowered me to have a voice and to not be silent, from the very beginning. And, when you're at an institution where you had a leader or a person in position of leadership that showed the courage to put 5 black players out, when that never been done before, and you're right there in the height of the civil rights movement as well, it changed the face of intercollegiate athletics. And it changed a lot of thought perception in society. I mean, you look at even different sports. I mean, there was a time when people didn't think a black quarterback could be a guy that could get you a championship and run the team, and things. So a lot of perceptions and barriers and stereotypes were broken down, with Coach Haskins having the courage to be able to do that. And I said to our guys, even as we were talking about it, I think the challenge moving forward for us is for us not to let this be pushed away. When the cameras are gone from CNN and Fox and everybody leaves, is this still going to be in the forefront? Okay, what are you going to do to keep this in the forefront in terms of, bringing awareness and, more importantly, bringing about change? Because we need change. I mean, we've endured racism for 100 years and over 100 years in our country, and it's something that again, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and sometimes people really just not educated to racism if they haven't really experienced or endured it. So again, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. We know we need a change. We need a change in our law enforcement policies and things of that nature there. And at the end of the day, I think you saw an escalation on a lot of injustices in the past based on law enforcement type situations where, you had the entire country and the entire world saying enough is enough. And there needs to be a change right now. But a lot of it comes with leadership. And again, I'm at a program where we have strong leadership and someone in that position, Coach Haskins, that showed the courage to do it.
Well, you were talking about how you bring speakers in and you want to listen. And that listening and education seem to be the 2 bywords we've had so far in this conversation. But you bring speakers in to let the players know that there are other people out there and also to give you an understanding of what they're feeling. Tell us about Marcus West, one of your assistant coaches, and the story behind him and what he did.
Yeah. I think it all goes back to here's my goal. If this were to ever happen again, which Lord hope it won't, that you have a foundation set in place to where these guys are able to become leaders in situations like this, and that they understand there's a structure in place and a system in place where you've been proactive, right? And that this is not, oh my goodness, I've missed out on so many opportunities to be able to educate, that this is a part of our culture and this is who we are, and this is, our players do have a voice in what we do. So, we've brought in speakers. I think the culture piece of our program has been my priority over this last 3 months, as I looked at it and said, all right, what can I control when I don't have a chance to be around them every day? I can't make sure that they're working out. I can't make sure that, from a schematic standpoint, that we're doing what we need to. So the culture aspect of what we're doing has been at the forefront of our last 3 months. And obviously with situations that have gone on over the last 3 weeks, the culture has shifted. The conversation has shifted. And I think it's a chance for us to create real conversation, us to talk about African-American history. I know Marcus West was talking to Inky Johnson yesterday on our team call about Emmett Till and 1955 and what happened with this story. And I'm sitting there as a white man on the phone call, and I'm saying, I don't know what that story is. I haven't heard that story before. And I think it's my job as a head coach to humble myself enough to say, I don't understand. Educate me, help me understand, help me, explain the situation so that I can not be so ignorant the next time that this happens. And that is the problem, is that a lot of people like myself haven't been educated on some of those historical moments that may be, from where some of this hatred or from where some of these experience, or the frustration, why didn't it change then? Why is it still the same now as it was then? So, I had to be the guy that said, educate me, help me learn, help me understand, help me have your back. I think Mufu I talk to our players about this all the time. Okay. One player from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte gets arrested. What's the headline? University of North Carolina at Charlotte football player gets arrested, right?
Exactly.
So we're going to judge 120 players on a football team based on the actions of one. That's what we're doing right now. That's why racism exists, is because we look to the extreme, we look for the worst of the worst, and we say that race has got to be like this because of that one person. So if we don't want them to judge our football team that way, then why are we willing to judge an entire race based on that? And I think what I'm so lucky to have had the experience of doing is I've been around the best of the best. My best friends that are on our staff they don't look like me. I've got tons of, black coaches that I think I hired them because they're the best candidate, because they're the best people, not because of what they look like. I hired them based on their character. I hired them based on their relationships with our players. I have confidence and hope and trust in the type of players we have in our locker room and the type of people we have in our locker room that we can impact change. I'm not giving up on this. This is something that I want to change during my lifetime, not just expecting it to change during my 5-year-old's lifetime. So, and I think to be able to do that in a leadership position, I have to be humble enough to learn. I have to be willing to learn, and I have to make sure that it's something that's at the forefront of our culture.
And I think part of the leadership, yes, it's the coaches, yes, it's the administrators. I think it's players like Mufu, who's not afraid to speak up, but is doing it the correct way, because sometimes the message gets lost in the bravado and the headlines. And my wife and I were talking about last night, we got to step away from the headlines and find out, okay, how is this problem going to be solved? Mufu, from your standpoint, I don't want to say it puts a lot of pressure on you, but I think just talking to you over the last couple of minutes, you understand your responsibility, not only as a football player, but also as a black man. True?
Yes. And I think the biggest thing that, and you touched on this for a second, was know how to talk about it. When this first happened, I was outraged, because this has been going on for so long. And the story was always, when I was younger, my mom, talked to me at a very young age and was like, hey, there's this current situation. This is how you're viewed in the world, So when this happens, you have to do, X, Y, Z, because this is the current situation. And she always said, hopefully by the time where I'm an adult, that this would be, gone. But here I am, I'm 23 years old. My time in college is about to be done. It's still going on. And then the decade just started, by the end of this decade, I'm looking at, 33 years old. I'm going to have kids I got to have the same conversation with, because it's still going to be here. And then, so that's kind of where all that kind of comes together, because I can be so mad and outraged because this has been going on for so long, and personal stuff is happening to me as well too. So now when I see it happen to somebody else, it's very frustrating. So, but I knew just by what I was going through that I had to, bring it in and, kind of calm myself down, because I knew that others will follow by me and follow my lead. And then it wouldn't have been the right message that I was trying to get out. So I actually had to take a step back and kind of collect my thoughts and kind of go about it the right way, just so I know that I could handle it the right way and not, de-irritate from the message that was, I was trying to, relay.
Mufu, when are you running for office?
He's going to get hired as coach on my staff too.
I'll tell you.
I want him here with us.
Buddy. Yeah,
That's funny. So that's the joke at ODU.
The unique part about him, and I talk to our players about this all the time. Look, and I'm talking about white, black, Hispanic. I'm talking about the educational piece, and when you take a stand, making it educated. I'm not talking about the stereotypes of, wow, I can't believe that Mufu is no, I know he's educated. And when he takes a stand, people are going to listen because he's done his research, because he understands how the platform that he has, and people are going to follow him. That's important. It's important for me as a white person. It's important for him. It's important for our student athletes, our coaches, and I got to do a better job of it. But I think what's so impressive about him is that people are going to follow him because he's got a great message. He's lived it. He's passionate about it, and he's handling it the right way to make sure that he can be able to relate to all different types of people to unify people.
Mm-hmm.
Merton,
go ahead. Yeah, I just want to say something, especially because when Coach Healy said this, they kind of the message that I was trying to tell people, it kind of definitely it reminded me of that. And I think the biggest thing right now is that before anything happens, whether you want to launch, a whole diversity and inclusion initiative or whatever you want to do, the first step is definitely to make it, personal. Because when it's personal, you are motivated to do things that you don't even think about doing. And the good example is that, and I'm looking at UTEP, I don't have a relationship with anybody at UTEP. So if something happened with UTEP, and I'm going to be real, it's not going to really affect me as much because I don't know anything about UTEP, the players there or anything like that. Because, our SAAC rep, he was at UTEP, but then, he left, But then now at Charlotte, where I know their AD, I have former coaches at Charlotte. I know Charlotte football players. I know Charlotte baseball players. They're track players. So when something happened at Charlotte, especially, last year with the mass shooting, I was personally affected by that. So I was motivated to do stuff at ODU. Hey, we need to have some gun violence stuff at ODU. We need to do that because I was personally affected by it. So that's why when I tell people, when we're talking about our message and our voice and everything, we need to keep saying that because that's how the change happens. Our president, me and him talk on our personal cell phones all the time. So when this happened and he realized something, happened like this magnitude, I'm the first person he called because he knows that, okay, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? Like, I'm saying, what can we do to be better? So with anything that goes on, it needs to be personal because that's just, the message. And then with Coach Healy, he said, I grew up all white. And in his personal bubble, that's what he was part of his environment, So his environment, my environment growing up, two completely different things. So what was my, message growing up, hey, like, this is the current situation. In his world, that's just what he's a product of. He didn't have to deal with, all that stuff growing up. And he didn't have to be exposed to, the black player situation until he became a coach. So that's where it became personal for him. So now he's motivated. Now he's trying to do better to help out all his players. And I think that's one thing that I try to tell, my student athletes that where I'm talking to is that, like, you can't know everybody's upbringing. Even on the football team, the person on the right of you has a different upbringing than the person on the left of you. And we're both, all of us are black, right? And everybody's different, So that's another thing, too, where we have to keep in mind that some people, too, don't get mad at Coach Healy for not growing up in that environment, but encourage them to, hey, Coach, this is where we're coming from as a player, and we want you to know where we're coming from because this is our life and what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that's what really is going to spark the change because it gets personal.
One of the highlights of listening to everybody talk is watching the smile on Merton's face when Mufu was talking, and so proud. And I can tell Merton, if I'm wrong, tell me, but you feel like you're so proud of these coaches, administrator, and for Mufu for the stand they're taking right now. Dig a little deeper. Tell me how personal this is for you when you hear this.
Well, first I want to say thank you to all the panelists and what the words that they've shared because it's a collective effort. Again, we're working together to overcome systematic oppression and differences that keep people apart. I share this with my colleagues at the conference office, I grew up next to a young man that was in the Ku Klux Klan in Northeast Dallas. And this young man, through our interactions and living life together, did a complete 180. So, as I like to say, no one's not redeemable. It's a matter of building strong relationships and living life together. And racism gets in the way of that because there's preconceived notions of that. So when you see young leaders like Mufu and Coach Healy and Coach Terry, and certainly what athletic director Campos excuse me, I always say Campos, but it's Campos, is doing on their campuses and in their communities, it's inspiring because that's what I've lived. You know, and the only way you do that is through great relationships, making sure people understand that we have more in common than we do not in common, regardless of our home life. If you grew up with grandma, grandpa, one-parent family, two-parent family, extremely wealthy, dirt poor, at the end of the day, people are people. How are we going to work together? So long as that goal is paramount, a lot of things can be overcome. And what you're seeing nationally, not only nationally, from a worldwide perspective, unlike 20, 30 years ago, I dare say the breadth of participation from an ethnic scale. We have basically every single ethnicity on the planet saw what this act did and really became galvanized around moving forward to change. And so that's inspiring. So you need young leaders like Mufu, you need young leaders like you have on this panel, because let's face it, racism is a pretty big monster, but we got to go fight it together.
Voices of reason. That's what seems to come to my mind as I listen to all of you. And that's something that my wife and I have prayed about and talked about. Voices of reason. Lisa, a lot of the coaches are going to give their players the day off in November to vote. Do you see that happening in your coaching staff down at UTSA?
Yeah, absolutely. I look at our coach. He's new. He's just getting to know his team, and to be thrust into a Zoom call with his players and to see the positive social media, the text messages I received, the follow-up text messages, that to someone's earlier point, that our students want to know our head coaches care. They want to know that they're going to be heard. They want their voices heard. And Coach did such a tremendous job of that with his team. I guess it was last week. And we're going to support our team in the initiatives that they want to take. And certainly, to Coach Terry's point earlier, that voting is one of the most important things to do to make change.
Coach Terry, your players aren't going to have practice, I would have to think, that day in November.
No, we've already joined the movement with that. I think we've got really good momentum right now within the NCAA right now with college coaches and particular basketball coaches. I think started the movement really with wanting to take that day off to make sure our guys had an opportunity to get to the polls and to vote and things of that nature there. But again, we've been in this pandemic for a little bit here, and we've all kind of been locked to the TV. And you spoke earlier about The Last Dance, and seeing a lot of different things. And I'm listening to Coach Healy a little bit as well. And I'm kind of one of those history buffs a little bit. So in my spare time, I'll watch a lot of documentaries and things of that nature from the past. And just a little reference point: the Emmett Till story is on Netflix. It's a great documentary. And you can read the story, obviously, and read the book. There's been, I'm sure some books published about it, but there's a great documentary that details that whole story. And, again, it was something I saw very early in my life. There used to be Jet magazine. And I can remember going into, as a young boy, going into the barbershop and getting a haircut. And there you have the Jet magazine sitting right there, and you're sitting there and you're waiting. And you're looking at the magazine, and you look and you read this story about Emmett Till, and you're like, oh, my God, how could that happen? And it's always had an unbelievable effect on me in my life, and it's something I never forgot as a young boy, seeing what I saw in that magazine that day, because the mother of Emmett Till said, she wanted the whole world to see what they've done to my baby. I want everybody to see this evil that they've done to my baby, and it was published. There were pictures of it, and so when you saw that and you saw what he looked like as a normal human person, and then you saw the inhuman act that they performed on him, you're just like, oh my God, you take him back, and it just took me back to all that. But also Malcolm X is another really good one, another controversial guy that again did a lot of really good things as well. And I can remember, Coach Healy talking about, not being educated on a lot of times. A lot of things are not in the history books. When you leave high school, you didn't spend a lot of time studying Malcolm X. I got to study Malcolm X when I went to college. And it's when I really kind of got into what he was all about. And a lot of times they tried to pit the leaders against each other in terms of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And really, in reality, those guys were on the same page and they're fighting for the same common goal. It's the injustice of a certain group. And also one more point of reference is Barack Obama. Also another really good documentary, all on Netflix now, all good ones you can educate yourself with. And again, these were, prominent guys and people that made a change and made a difference in our society. So, can you educate yourself? All the time. Can we as people of color educate ourselves? Absolutely. And we often have to do that many times with our players. And over the last 5 years, I've gone to another level in terms of really trying to educate my guys and dealing with people of authority, the law enforcement in particular, your interaction with them. You come into contact with them because all my guys, a lot of my guys, they drive cars and, they're going to be pulled over at some point. And they're going to have the right kind of communication, the right demeanor as they're dealing with law enforcement, much like myself. So they have to be able to navigate through everyday life and doing that, and that's a part of everyday life. And no one wants to lose their life over running a stop sign or running a red light or speeding, with not having the right kind of communication. But that's the harsh reality of what we have to deal with every day as men of color, and it's something we have to talk about, and something we haven't talked enough about in this country. And now it's at the forefront. We got to keep it at the forefront, and hopefully we'll have a lot of change with it.
If I can add on Coach Terry real quick, I think one of the things that I've probably prayed about the most over the last 3 weeks is how to educate my 5-year-old. I got a 5-year-old little boy, and the dude is awesome, and he's best friends with Eddie Hicks' kids and Brandon Cooper's kids, and I don't know if any of you have seen the video of the 2-3-year-old little boys. One of them's black, one of them's white. They see each other on the side of the road. They run up and they hug each other.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a great illustration. If you don't think this is something that's taught and learned, you're lying to yourself. My 5-year-old has no idea that any of this existed. Now, what I was struggling with and praying about more than anything was, all right, we've got to march on campus, right? And do I take my 5-year-old to this? Do I want him to understand there is a problem with some of the relationships that he already has, that some of his best friends who may not look like him? And I got to the point where I was like, I'm going for the right reasons. I'm taking my wife, I'm taking my 5-year-olds for the right reasons, because I want our players to understand my family is behind them. And number 2 is I want this to be a learning opportunity, whether my 5-year-old gets it right. He doesn't get that that social distancing, he's playing tackle football in the front yard. He doesn't know what distancing is. He doesn't know what racism is. He doesn't understand any of that right now. But I hope that one day I can go back to the picture of Braylon Faison Walden with my 5-year-old wearing a Charlotte football jersey with my 5-year-old on his shoulders, and Trey Creamer, walking, and Peter Agabe walking with our offensive coordinator, hand in hand with our offensive coordinator's kid and my kid walking down the street in a protest, and say, look, this is the world that you've grown up in. Now you understand, now you're educated, now you can make a real difference. And that's a powerful experience for me now. Like, look, it's not about me. It's not about, our staff. It's not what can we do that's different than everybody else and make a name for ourselves in recruiting or whatever it is. Like, I understand the perception of being a white head coach with a predominantly black team. And how many times have these guys grown up in a situation where, the white coach only cares about them if they're playing good, or the white coach is making a bunch of money and I'm not able to make any money off of what I do, So I understand those situations that are going on with this too, but I think it's up to me to educate my household and my 5-year-old as well. And not only myself, but now that's got to trickle down to what I got going into my own house, so that my 5-year-old is able to be an agent of change as well. Coach Terry, we asked our guys the other day on Monday in our team meeting how many of them had watched the entire MLK speech. And not just the clips, not just the best, like the entire speech. And so I think, like you talked about with the documentaries, which I'm Netflixed out, and anything that's not Real Housewives of San Diego or whatever my wife wants to watch, I'm all for it. So yes, we'll be doing that as well.
Well, I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, this has been outstanding. There's a lot of noise out there, and I think that distracts from what really should happen. And I'm glad, and I'm just got goosebumps on my goosebumps now, that we have people like all of you that have a clear vision and an understanding. And maybe hopefully in my lifetime, I'll finally be able to see some real change. Folks, thank you so much. God bless all of you. Awesome job today. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Ron. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Mufu, great job, man. You do your thing.